So, the trailer for Tron Ares just dropped, and I'm already bracing for the wave of nostalgia-driven hype that I know is coming. But here's the thing, I'm just not excited. At all. And I know that's probably blasphemy to some sci-fi fans, but I'm gonna break it down anyway. Let's start with the first reason, Jared Leto. Now, I know some people love the guy, the method acting, the avant-garde choices, the Oscar win, but me? I've never been sold. In fact, it's the reason I didn't even bother with Blade Runner 2049. And yes, I've heard it's a masterpiece from people whose taste I respect, I just couldn't get past the Leto factor. To be fair, even if he hadn't been in it, I have a hard time believing any sequel could top Ridley Scott's original. That movie was lightning in a bottle. A philosophical fever dream with industrial smoke and existential dread. Replicants, neon noir, Vangelis, it was magic. Trying to recreate that is like chasing ghosts. But Jared Leto's presence in Tron Ares isn't even my biggest issue, believe it or not. The bigger issue is this. I've just never been a Tron fan. Now, before anyone jumps in with pitchforks and digital identity discs, let me say, I wanted to understand the appeal. I really did. I first watched the original Tron back in 2020 when Disney re-released it alongside Tron Legacy on DVD. Tron Legacy hadn't even come out in theaters yet. I figured it was time. Everyone was talking about the visual innovation, the influence, the cult legacy, so I sat down, expected to be wowed, and what I got instead was boredom. And not because it was outdated. I've got all the love in the world for vintage sci-fi. Forbidden Planet, the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, Star Crash, yes, that weird Italian Star Wars knockoff with Caroline Munro and David Hasselhoff, even the 1960 version of The Time Machine, and the original Westworld from 1973. I eat that stuff up. So when people suggest the reason I didn't enjoy Tron was because the visuals are outdated, I call bullshit. It's not about the effects, it's about the storytelling. Tron has always felt sterile to me. Slick, sure, conceptually interesting, maybe, but emotionally flat. Even with the digital world, the light cycles, the glowing suits, it never pulled me in. And then there's Tron Legacy. Updated visuals, sleek soundtrack courtesy of Daft Punk, a bigger budget, still didn't connect. And it's not because I need every sci-fi film to be gritty or introspective. It just didn't offer much outside of shiny surfaces and tech jargon. But what really baffles me is Disney's insistence on making Tron Ares a tentpole investment. Let's be honest, Tron has never been a box office titan. The original underperformed, Legacy did okay, but nothing record-shattering. And Tron 3 got shelved after Tomorrowland bombed, which, by the way, had a similar futuristic aesthetic and big-name talent. And yet, Disney thinks there's something here worth revisiting. Maybe the trailer gives us a clue. There's definitely an AI angle, a sort of digital god narrative, and if that's where they're going, using the Tron universe to explore modern fears about artificial intelligence, surveillance, and what happens when tech crosses ethical lines, then okay, I can see the potential. But it raises a big question. Wouldn't it make more sense to tackle those ideas in a brand new property? Something unbound by the iconography of Tron, the weight of cult expectations, and the inherent limitations of a franchise that's never fully taken off? If the goal is to comment on AI, data control, identity in the digital age, do we really need the grid to do that? And I get it, Disney owns the IP. Legacy sequels are what they do best. But just because you can reboot something doesn't mean you should. Especially when the fan base, while loyal, is relatively niche. Let's not forget that the arcade game based on the original film outgrossed the actual movie. So what are we doing here? Nostalgia for nostalgia's sake? Look, I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum. If you love Tron, good for you. But for me, this feels like revisiting the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Another movie where I found myself outside the generational bubble. I know the original is iconic, groundbreaking at its time, but personally, I prefer the 2003 remake. And yeah, I know that's sacrilege for some horror purists, but I said what I said, and here's why. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre suffers from what's long been called pioneer syndrome. It was the first of its kind. Before 1974, horror movies didn't center around serial killers in the way slashers do now. It cracked open the door for the genre, no question. But being first doesn't automatically mean being best. Just like Tomb Raider in the gaming world, it redefined the action platformer in 1996. But since then, we've seen games like Uncharted, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Prince of Persia: Sands of Time take that blueprint and refine it into something more immersive, more polished, and more narratively compelling. Same goes for slashers. Texas Chainsaw laid the groundwork, but then came Halloween, Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, Terrifier, and even The Funhouse, which ironically was also directed by Tobe Hooper. These films didn't just follow the formula, they evolved it. They added layers of suspense, character psychology, and in some cases, social commentary that Chainsaw only hinted at. So yes, I acknowledge its importance, but I also think it's okay to say that later entries in the genre did it better. Being a pioneer is admirable, but sometimes the trailblazer gets outpaced by those who follow with better tools and clearer vision. And that brings me to another example, one I mentioned in a recent video about Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. That film isn't the first adaptation of Homer's epic. In fact, back in 1954, there was a film called Ulysses starring Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn. You wouldn't know it's based on The Odyssey just from the title, but it is. And what's remarkable is that it was made without CGI. They used miniatures, matte paintings, and full-scale sets to bring the myth to life. That was state-of-the-art filmmaking at the time. Same goes for Ray Harryhausen's work. Before The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, creatures like the Cyclops were usually portrayed by actors in suits, but Harryhausen used stop-motion animation to create something truly magical. That Cyclops wasn't just a monster, it was a technological leap, and Jason and the Argonauts built on that, especially with the skeleton sword fight that's still iconic today. Even King Kong from 1933 deserves credit. It pioneered techniques like rear projection, matte painting, and miniatures. Without King Kong, you don't get Jurassic Park, you don't get Avatar, you don't get Tron Legacy. And if we're talking CGI, we have to talk about the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Say what you want about the storytelling, but those films pushed digital effects to the next level. They pioneered virtual environments, digital characters, and entire worlds built in post-production. Without Attack of the Clones, CGI wouldn't be where it is today. But let's not forget, Tron did it first. Back in 1982, Tron was one of the earliest films to incorporate computer-generated imagery in a meaningful, narrative-driven way. The light cycle sequence alone was a technological marvel. Disney worked with 4 major graphics houses, Magi, III, Digital Effects, and Robert Abel and Associates to create over 15 minutes of pure CGI and hundreds of computer-generated backgrounds. That was revolutionary. It was the first time a film truly committed to building a digital world, and I respect that, I really do. Tron helped shape the visual language of modern sci-fi. It laid the groundwork for everything from The Matrix to Ready Player One. But here's the thing, I still find the movie boring. The innovation is undeniable. The storytelling just doesn't land for me. And Tron Legacy, despite its upgraded visuals and Daft Punk soundtrack, didn't change that. So yeah, Legacy matters, not just in terms of story, but in terms of craft. And while I may not be excited about Tron Ares, I can still respect the lineage of innovation that got us here. But I'm not going to watch Tron Ares, not in theaters, not on streaming. This is probably the only video I'll ever make about it. I've said my piece, and unless something radically shifts in the cultural conversation around this franchise, that's all you'll get from me on the subject. But I'd love to hear from you. Is Tron Ares something you're excited about? Does Jared Leto being cast make you more curious or less? And do you think Tron as a franchise has earned its place as a major investment for Disney, or should they have started fresh? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely interested to see how people feel about this one. And until next time, here's hoping the future of sci-fi doesn't glow, it evolves.